Hello everyone! I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're jumping straight into a powerful New Year story with Jeong Jot, Little Ly, and police officer Ly, where one simple phone call on the last day of Tet turns into a heartfelt invitation that could shape an entire family's luck for the year ahead. Why did Ly specifically ask James and his family to be the first to step into his home on New Year's morning? And what does this Vietnamese tradition of Jeong Jot truly mean beyond superstition? Stay with me as we uncover the emotion, the culture, and the deep friendship behind this unforgettable first day of the year. And if you love meaningful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next journey together. Late afternoon on the last day of the lunar year always carries a different kind of warmth. It's not just the sunlight filtering softly through the curtains or the faint scent of incense lingering in the air. It's the feeling that something is about to close and something new is about to begin. On the 30th of Tet, James stood by the window for a moment, watching the quiet neighborhood settle into that peaceful pause before midnight. Inside the house, everything felt calm, almost glowing with anticipation. Without overthinking it, he picked up his phone and called Ly. "Hey, Ly," James said, his voice light and cheerful. "Tomorrow morning, on the first day of the new year, Tu Diep, Little Ly, and I would love to come by and wish you and Tu Sam a happy Tet." There was a brief silence on the other end, and then Ly burst into laughter, the kind of laugh that fills a room even through a phone speaker. In the background, James could hear Tu Sam asking what was happening, and as soon as Ly told her, her voice lit up too. "Really?" Ly said, still smiling through his words. "If you come on the first day, then our house will truly be blessed this year." They talked for a few more minutes, exchanging simple but sincere wishes, reflecting on how quickly the year had passed. And then Ly's tone shifted slightly, not serious in a heavy way, but thoughtful. "If you don't mind," Ly continued, "I'd actually like to ask you something special. I want your family to Jeong Jot our house this year." James paused. He had heard the phrase before, but it felt distant, like something tied to childhood memories he hadn't fully understood. Ly explained gently, "Your ages, Dieps, and Little Ny's, they're very compatible with this year. We believe it will bring good fortune." From the background, Tu Sam added softly, "If the three of you are the first to step into our home, I'm sure this year will be filled with laughter." James felt unexpectedly moved. It wasn't just an invitation, it was trust, it was belief. After he hung up, he turned to Tu Diep, who had been watching him with a curious smile. "What exactly is Jeong Jot?" he asked honestly. "I've been away for so long, I don't think I ever fully understood it." Tu Diep smiled, the kind of smile that carries both culture and affection. She took a moment, choosing her words carefully, not just for James, but as if she were explaining it to someone from another part of the world. "In Vietnam," she began, "we believe that the first person who enters a house after the new year begins can influence the family's luck for the entire year." James listened quietly. "Jeong Jot," she continued, "means being the very first visitor of the year. People usually choose someone cheerful, kind, and full of positive energy. Someone who's doing well in life, someone who carries good fortune." She looked at him gently. "It's not superstition in a negative sense. It's more about symbolism, about starting the year with hope, with optimism, with good wishes," she added in English, as if speaking directly to a global audience. "It's like symbolically opening the door to good fortune." James nodded slowly, letting it sink in. "So tomorrow," he said softly, "we're not just visiting, we're bringing hope." The next morning arrived with a quiet brightness. The first day of Tet always feels different. The air seems fresher, lighter, as if the world itself has taken a deep breath. James dressed neatly, adjusting his shirt collar while little Ly giggled in his arms. Tu Diep carefully prepared a basket filled with traditional New Year gifts, tea, sweets, and a few red envelopes tucked discreetly inside. There was no rush, but there was intention. Every detail felt meaningful. They arrived at Ly and Tu Sam's home at an auspicious hour, chosen carefully. James stood at the door holding Ly while Tu Diep stood beside him with the gift basket. He knocked gently. The door opened almost immediately. Ly and Tu Sam were already waiting, their smiles wide and genuine. There was something beautiful about that moment, two families standing at the threshold of a new year together. Following the plan, James stepped in first, carrying Ly. Tu Diep followed closely behind. Little Ly laughed as soon as they crossed the doorway, her innocent joy filling the house with sound. And in that instant, it didn't feel like a ritual anymore. It felt like warmth, like light entering a space. The atmosphere inside the house shifted. It was subtle, but real. There was hope in the air. Soon, red envelopes appeared. They exchanged Ly Shi with both hands, a small bow of respect accompanying each gesture. For viewers unfamiliar with the tradition, Tu Diep explained softly, "Red envelopes contain lucky money. The red color symbolizes protection and prosperity. It's not about the amount inside, it's about the blessing." They wished each other health, peace, success, and happiness. Words like prosperity, family harmony, and new beginnings floated through the room. When little Ly received her envelope, she stared at it curiously before bursting into laughter again, as if she somehow understood she was part of something bigger. They sat down together around a small wooden table where hot tea steamed gently in porcelain cups. A plate of bánh chung rested at the center. James picked up a slice carefully. "I remember eating this as a child," he said, "but I never really knew what it meant." Tu Diep smiled again. "Bánh chung represents the earth. It reminds us of our roots, of gratitude to our ancestors, of remembering where we come from." Ly nodded thoughtfully. "Every year when I eat this, I think about my parents, about everything they endured so we could have better lives." The conversation grew deeper, more personal. Ly shared stories of difficult years in his career, moments when he doubted himself. James spoke about living abroad, about feeling both independent and disconnected at the same time. Tu Sam talked about how friendships, not just family, carry us through life. "Tet isn't just about tradition," she said quietly. "It's about preserving connection." There was a pause after that. Not an awkward silence, but a meaningful one. James looked at Tu Diep and then at little Ly, who was now sitting between them, playing with the red envelope. He felt something steady inside him. "Maybe this is what New Year truly means," he said slowly. "Not just turning a page on the calendar, but beginning again with the people who matter." Tu Diep nodded, her eyes soft. Ly leaned back slightly, reflecting. "Jeong Jot may bring luck," he said, "but it's friendship that keeps that luck alive." And in that room, on the first morning of a new year, surrounded by tea, laughter, and shared memories, it felt true. For a few seconds, no one said anything after Ly's words. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of shared understanding, full of the quiet recognition that what they had just experienced together was more than a simple New Year visit. Outside, distant sounds of firecrackers echoed faintly through the neighborhood. Somewhere, children were laughing. Somewhere else, another door was opening for another first visitor of the year. But inside this home, time felt slower, softer. James leaned back slightly, watching the steam rise from his tea. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I lived overseas, New Year was always loud. Fireworks, countdowns, parties. It was exciting, but it never felt like this. Like what? Tu Sam asked gently. Like it meant something personal, he replied. There, it felt like everyone was celebrating the same moment. Here it feels like we're protecting something intimate. Tu Diep smiled at him, understanding exactly what he meant. Tet in Vietnam was never just about midnight. It was about the morning after, about the first steps taken carefully, about who you choose to stand beside when the year begins. Ly nodded slowly. That's why Jeong Jot matters to us. It's not magic, it's intention. We choose someone we trust, someone who carries good energy. It reminds us that we have control over how we begin. And maybe, Tu Diep added softly, we also remind ourselves to be that good energy for others. Little Nhi suddenly crawled toward Ly, holding out her red envelope as if offering it back. Everyone laughed. She's already trying to return the blessing, Ly joked. James reached down and picked her up. No, sweetheart, you keep that. It's your first lucky money of the year. They stayed there longer than expected. That's the thing about meaningful moments. You don't feel the time passing. They refilled teacups. They cut more slices of bon chung. They shared stories that had nothing to do with luck or tradition and everything to do with life. Ly spoke about a case that had once shaken his confidence and how it was Tu Sam's quiet support that helped him through it. Tu Sam admitted that there had been years when she worried about the future, about stability, about whether they were making the right choices. And yet, she said, looking around the room, here we are, another year, another chance. James nodded. I used to think success meant moving forward constantly, bigger cities, bigger opportunities, but sometimes moving forward means coming back. He glanced at Tu Diep, coming back to where you belong. For viewers who may not be familiar with the deeper layers of Tet, this moment carried a universal message. Across cultures, across continents, the beginning of a new year often symbolizes change. But here, it also symbolizes continuity. The honoring of roots, the conscious decision to carry relationships into the future. Ly stood up and walked toward the small altar near the living room wall. It was decorated with fresh flowers and fruit, offerings to ancestors. He lit a stick of incense and bowed slightly. We thank those who came before us, he said quietly, and we promise to live well in the year ahead. James watched respectfully. He didn't speak, but something inside him felt grounded. Even if he had spent years away, even if he had adopted habits and perspectives from another world, moments like this reminded him that identity isn't erased by distance. When Ly returned to the table, he looked at James with sincerity. I'm glad it was you who stepped into our home first today. James smiled. I'm honored you trusted us. Tu Diep added playfully, now you have to believe the year will be good. We've officially delivered the good energy. Everyone laughed again, the kind of laughter that comes easily among people who feel safe together. As the morning stretched toward midday, sunlight streamed more brightly through the windows. The red envelopes on the table stood out vividly against the wooden surface. The house felt different now, not because of superstition, not because of invisible forces, but because the first hours of the year had been filled with intention, gratitude, and connection. Eventually, James stood up. We should let you enjoy the rest of your first day, he said. Tu Sam shook her head lightly. You've already made it special. They moved toward the door together. Before stepping out, James paused at the threshold and turned back. Happy New Year, he said again, more softly this time. Happy New Year, Ly and Tu Sam replied in unison. As James, Tu Diep, and little Nhi walked down the path outside the house, the world felt gently renewed. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks exploding in the sky at that moment. Just the quiet hum of a neighborhood waking up to its first morning of the year. Tu Diep slipped her hand into James's. "Do you understand Jeong Jot now?" she asked teasingly. James nodded. "Yes, it's not about stepping into a house. It's about stepping into someone's year." She smiled. "Exactly." Little Ly babbled happily between them, clutching her red envelope like a treasure. James looked ahead, then back at the house they had just left. "If this is how the year begins," he said, "I think it's going to be a good one." And maybe that was the true meaning of it all. Not the ritual itself, not the precise hour, not even the compatibility of zodiac signs. It was the decision to begin with kindness, to enter each other's lives gently, to choose hope deliberately. Because in the end, a new year doesn't promise anything on its own. It's the people who step through the door, with warmth, with sincerity, with love, who give it meaning. On the last afternoon of the lunar year, James calls police officer Ly to arrange a New Year visit, not knowing the invitation will become something much more meaningful. Ly and Tu Sam warmly ask James, Tu Diep, and little Ly to Jeong Jot their home, to be the first to enter and symbolically bring good luck for the year ahead. Curious after years abroad, James learns from Tu Diep that this Vietnamese tradition represents hope, positivity, and intentional beginnings rather than superstition. On New Year's morning, the two families reunite, exchange red envelopes, share heartfelt wishes, and reflect on friendship, gratitude, and new beginnings. Through laughter, tea, and quiet conversations, they realize that luck may start at the doorway, but it is trust, love, and connection that truly carry it forward.